Thousands of people line the streets as the Queen's coffin is taken from Balmoral to Edinburgh. This morning, the cortege left Balmoral Castle, where the Queen died on Thursday, for a 6-hour journey to Edinburgh. Silent onlookers gathered along the route to pay their respects, and some threw floral tributes in the path of the coffin. The cortege passed through key landmarks as people bid farewell to the country's longest reigning monarch.
Just as a mark of respect to see her kind of on her final journey back to London, I think it's just been really important to us as a family, just to pay our respects and just say goodbye to just a really amazing woman.
The accession of the new monarch, King Charles III, was proclaimed in towns and cities across the land, including in Edinburgh. And in London, crowds continued to flock to Buckingham Palace, where the King held meetings with diplomats from the 14 countries that recognise him as head of state. And in other news this afternoon, Ukraine's military say their forces have tripled the amount of territory they've retaken from Russia in little over 48 hours. And mixed emotions in India as it holds an official day of mourning for the death of the Queen. Good afternoon. The coffin of Queen Elizabeth is being taken on its journey to her final resting place. It left Balmoral, where she died on Thursday, and has now arrived in Edinburgh. Crowds gathered along the route as the cortege made the 175-mile journey to the Palace of Holyrood House, where the coffin will remain overnight. Meanwhile, proclamations formally announcing the accession of King Charles III have taken place in Cardiff, Edinburgh and Hillsborough Castle in County Down, as well as in towns and villages around the UK. The funeral cortege made the 6-hour journey down the east coast of Scotland from Balmoral through villages that the Queen got to know well during her stays in Scotland. It went through Aberdeen, southwards to Dundee, through Perth and then to Edinburgh, ending at Holyrood House. My colleague Kirsty Walk joins us now from there. Kirsty.
Reeta, we're outside the Palace of Holyrood House, the monarch's official residence in Scotland, the beautiful Renaissance palace, scene of key moments in Scotland's history. And today has been one of those such moments. A little while ago, the cortege carrying the Queen arrived from Balmoral to lie at rest before travelling up the Royal Mile to St Giles Cathedral tomorrow. It has been a solemn day in the capital city, and I was struck by the silence of the crowds, 10 deep, who stood near the Mercat Cross by the cathedral to witness the proclamation of King Charles III's accession to the throne, taking in what it all means. We are mourning the Queen as we proclaim the new king. There is comfort for many that she's here in Edinburgh for a while, near to where, at the opening of the Scottish Parliament, she was called the Queen of Scots. Our special correspondent Alan Little followed the Queen's cortege from her beloved home, Balmoral, to Scotland's capital.
It is the place she loved most. Balmoral was not a royal residence, but a private home to her. Her annual respite from the burdens of state and the unrelenting public gaze. Today, that gaze falls on this, the first public sight of the coffin of the Queen. She'd known this landscape since she was a child. From Balmoral to Aberdeen, they passed slowly through towns and villages that knew her not just as the Queen, but as their neighbour. Aboyne, Kincardine O'Neill, Banchory, Drumoak, Petercoutar. What is the symbolism of this measured progress, if not to say that she was rooted here, at home in the open green spaces of Royal Deeside? In Aberdeen, they stood in quiet witness before the cortege turned south towards the Scottish capital. In Edinburgh, the King's bodyguard for Scotland, the Royal Company of Archers, came to attend the noon proclamation of the reign of King Charles.
Whereas it has pleased Almighty God to call to his mercy our late Sovereign Lady Queen Elizabeth II, of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George. Three cheers for His Majesty the King! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
At several points, a small group of protesters booed and called for an independent Scottish Republic, but this was not the prevailing mood.
Probably one of the most important days of my life, to see the actual Prince Charles become king and be proclaimed here in Edinburgh.
I wish Prince, the King, should I say, all the best for the future. I think he has big boots to fill.
It's just so historic, and it's just something like just really important in history, and I feel so honored to be here and be able to see it. It's just something else.
Proclamations have been read on great state occasions here at the Mercat Cross of Edinburgh since the 14th century. The Queen was descended directly from Robert the Bruce, Scotland's patriot king, and from Mary, Queen of Scots. Today is another striking reminder of the long continuities in which the monarchy roots us. After Stonehaven, Brechin, Dundee, Perth, over the Forth and into Edinburgh. From Edinburgh Castle, the last mile is appropriately the Royal Mile, at the foot of which sits the monarch's official residence, the Palace of Holyrood House. This is where the Queen's ancestor, King James VI of Scotland, learned that he'd inherited the throne of England on the death of the first Elizabeth, thus uniting the two kingdoms in a regal union. The bearer party, formed by the Royal Regiment of Scotland, carried the coffin past 3 of the Queen's children. The Princess Royal had accompanied her mother's coffin on its progress from Balmoral. Here the coffin of the Queen will lie in rest in the throne room, before being taken tomorrow to St Giles Cathedral, where it will lie for 24 hours. For the people who lined the quiet streets today, this is the ritualizing of a nation's sorrow. But it is something else too, the ritualizing of transition, the crown passing from mother to son, and the public expectation of continuity. Alan Little, BBC News, Edinburgh.
Ballater is a small town in the River Dee, just 8 miles from Balmoral, and a place where the Queen knew locals and shopkeepers since she was a little girl. The local butcher recalled a conversation he had with the Queen less than a fortnight ago. About Balmoral, the Queen is reported to have said she felt she could hang up her crown at the door and live as close to a normal life as possible. People in Ballater were very protective of her, and the news of her death hit many hard. It was a tribute to the affection in which the Queen held them that the cortege slowed there this morning, and hundreds turned out to bid her a final farewell. Our Scotland editor James Cook has been speaking to people in the town to find out what today's procession meant to them.
Sometimes history unfolds quietly. Ballater bidding farewell to a sovereign and a neighbour.
It's just so sad, but privileged to be here and happy that we could say goodbye. She's been Queen from the day I was born. I was born on Coronation Day, and it's really special to me to say goodbye.
What did she mean to this area?
Well, we knew how much she loved Scotland and particularly Balmoral. And I think we'll miss seeing her going to church on Sundays.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
It's a bit sad that she's gone.
Yeah. Do you remember the last time you saw her? Where did we see her?
When she was going to church, when she's coming back from church at Balmoral.
That's right. And after that we think we saw her on horseback riding along the banks in the grounds of Balmoral.
For Adele Phillips, this is personal. She was a housekeeper to the Queen.
I didn't know her in the way that the public do. I saw her in her little tweed skirt and headscarf and that kind of thing.
And what was she like?
Funny, always happy. She liked to joke and she was sarcastic.
And what did that moment just there, watching her pass for the last time, mean to you?
It was quite poignant, but I'm glad I was here to see it. She meant a lot to the area, so it was fitting that it happened here.
Ballater is slowly getting back to normal, but what that looks like is not yet clear. One of the threads which bound the nation together has unravelled, and the question is, what is the future of the United Kingdom without Elizabeth? Because Royal Deeside is not Scotland in miniature. This country contains many citizens who are sceptical about monarchy and opposed to the Union. Not that you'd know it here. Not today.
I think she meant everything. She meant stability through all the years. She's the only monarch that I've ever known, and I think we always look to her, and I personally always look to her as someone who was always there through the dark times.
I think King Charles III now will transition very smoothly and very nicely, and I think he will definitely, she's big shoes to fill, but I think he will do his best for her, definitely.
Many here share that sentiment, but before they turn to the King, this was a final display of devotion to their Queen. James Cook, BBC News, Ballater.
Well, this was a day of record for Scotland, when the formal accession of King Charles III was recognised in an ages-old ceremony in the historic heart of this capital city, proclaimed from a 14th century Mercat cross. The trumpets sounded and the military spectacle lit up the Royal Mile beside St Giles Cathedral. And while it was happening, many miles to the north, the Queen's cortege was travelling slowly south through some of the Highland countryside that she loves so much. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, was in the cortege, accompanying her mother the whole way. And just as they had done in their thousands at Balmoral, people of all ages stood at the sides of the roads to pay their respects and bid farewell. Tomorrow, they will come in their many thousands to witness the procession of the Queen's coffin from the Palace of Holyrood House up to St Giles Cathedral. The King and Queen Consort will arrive in Scotland and will be met, amongst others, by the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon. A service of thanksgiving for the life of Her Majesty the Queen will be tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. Reeta.
Kirsty, many thanks. Well, let's look ahead to what will be happening in the coming days during this period of national mourning. As Kirsty was saying, the Queen's coffin will remain lying in the throne room at Holyrood House in Edinburgh until tomorrow afternoon. At just after 2:30 on Monday, the King and members of the royal family will accompany the coffin in a procession along the Royal Mile to St Giles's Cathedral, where a service will be held. The Queen will lie at rest at the cathedral for 24 hours, allowing the public to view her coffin for the first time. At 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the coffin will leave the cathedral to be flown from Edinburgh to London by the Royal Air Force. It'll arrive at RAF Northolt on Tuesday evening and then travel by road to Buckingham Palace to rest in the Bow Room. Princess Anne will accompany the Queen's body. On Wednesday afternoon, the Queen's coffin will be taken from Buckingham Palace to the Palace of Westminster. The slow procession will be accompanied by a military parade and by members of the royal family. The Queen will lie in state in the oldest part of the Palace of Westminster, Westminster Hall, for 4 full days until the morning of her funeral, allowing members of the public to file past and pay their respects. Details on how people can view the coffin will be released soon. The Queen's state funeral will take place at Westminster Abbey at 11 o'clock on Monday, the 19th of September. The day will begin with the Queen's coffin being carried from Westminster Hall to the Abbey on the state gun carriage of the Royal Navy. The day has been declared a bank holiday across the UK. Now, look at these scenes from Buckingham Palace right now, where thousands of people have come to pay their respects here and along the Mall and in Green Park, which is just next to the palace. King Charles arrived at Buckingham Palace earlier today to begin his work as the country's new monarch. Our royal correspondent Daniela Ralph reports.
They have been arriving in their thousands. The slow, quiet walk through Green Park towards Buckingham Palace. Security guards at times had to hold the crowd back to manage the flow of people. But still they kept coming. With no school at the weekend, there were a huge number of families here. Some even brought their pets. The mood sober and thankful.
We're just in shock how busy it is.
It's very sad as well, like how many people appreciated the Queen and stuff. It's like nice to see everyone coming together.
Because there's loads of people, it makes you feel better. It does. Because when everyone's sad, but then when you see other people, you feel like better.
I hadn't actually cried until I've come today. The atmosphere is amazing. It's kind of just peaceful and sort of tranquil, but very respectful.
As the crowds continue to gather here for the King, it has been a day filled with the business of royalty, the meetings and the audiences that will now take up much of his working life. King Charles arrived at Buckingham Palace from Clarence House, where he's still living. The convoy slowed as it reached the palace gates, giving the crowd a clear view. Inside, there was a reception for High Commissioners based in London. Many he will have known already. And he spent time with the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, two men new to their roles. With him, Camilla, Queen Consort, as she too begins a new stage of her life as a working royal. The proclamation of a new king in front of Windsor Castle.
It has pleased Almighty God to call to his mercy our late Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George.
This royal town has been mourning a queen who made her home here in recent years. What is becoming increasingly clear is the public's desire to do something or go somewhere as a way of paying their respects. It is a feeling likely to strengthen in the coming days ahead of the state funeral. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
Let's go now to our correspondent Duncan Kennedy, who's outside Buckingham Palace for us now. Duncan.
Well, Rita, this is Green Park just across from Buckingham Palace, just a few hundred yards away, and you can see all these beautiful flowers here. I think it's only been 4 days since the Queen died, but this could well be one of the images of this whole incredible week. When they come to write the record and set the history for this, it's images like this that we will remember. In many ways, it's like walking through a living painting. And two of those who've come to appreciate it here today are Reeta and Ruth. Reeta, what do you make of all these beautiful flowers that they set out here?
I think they look absolutely fantastic. They're so well done. You can walk right round and read all the cards, and there's some beautiful cards written in respect for our Queen.
And Ruth, what are you making of it?
It's absolutely amazing. I didn't expect to be able to go around and see all the cards today. I've read so many cards with personal and heartfelt messages, so many saying thank you.
Now, Rita, you have some very special memories here, some things have caught your eye particularly.
Paddington Bear and jars of marmalade, and what some of the children have written and drawn, and the words that they've even put on little cards has been so wonderful.
And Ruth, you've even seen some of your favourite flowers here.
I have, yes. The white rose is my favourite flower. It's just so elegant and peaceful.
I think one of the things that struck me is that whereas outside the palace it's quite hard to read them, they're so deep, when they're put here and laid out in this beautiful way, it's easier to access them, easier to see it all.
It is. You can go right round every one that's laid out and read every card if you've got time to do it, because there's so many flowers here.
Why is that so important, to get close to them and to be able to see them up close?
Because you can actually go and read all the messages. Like I said earlier, so many people have said thank you. It's been lovely.
I mean, we've seen these flowers outside Balmoral, outside Windsor, but again, they're up against walls, pavements. Sometimes it's not easy to access them. Here, they've almost created a flower display.
They have. They've done absolutely wonderful. Whoever designed it or thought of it has done really well, because it's a lovely. There's heart shapes, there's the round trees everywhere. It's so nice to walk around.
Have you seen any special bouquets, anything that's caught your eye in particular?
I think a message where somebody had seen the Queen on numerous occasions has caught my eye, and saying thank you and how she touched their hearts.
Had you been across to the palace before coming over here?
No, we were going over in a minute to have a look.
But this is impressive enough.
It is. Oh, this is absolutely lovely. It really is.
Rita and Ruth, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. The flowers are expected to stay here until after the Queen's funeral on Monday. But right now, Rita, they're absolutely beautiful.
Duncan, thank you so much. Duncan Kennedy there. Well, as we said earlier, proclamations marking the accession of King Charles have been held in towns and villages across the UK, as well as in the three capitals of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. At the service in Cardiff, the proclamation was read in English and Welsh at Cardiff Castle. Earlier today, the Prince of Wales, the Prince of Wales spoke to Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales, and talked about his wish to deepen his relationship with communities across Wales. Our correspondent Howell Griffith reports now from Cardiff.
History is measured by the names of monarchs. And so this new chapter begins with a new title for the Carolean era.
The Prince, Charles Philip Arthur George, is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III.
Around 1,000 people gathered inside the castle, fewer than expected, but those who were there wanted to witness the proclamation.
It's a really momentous occasion, and our girls are really interested. They were really sad. We were all really sad about the Queen's passing.
So a new era has now officially begun. The crowds here today were modest, but many more are expected on Friday, when Charles makes his first visit to Wales as King.
It follows over 60 years as Prince of Wales. His investiture in Caernarfon in 1969 drew crowds, but protests too. It's a ceremony some think won't be repeated for his successor, Prince William, who was given the title on Friday. In a statement today, he said that he and his wife Catherine wanted to do their part to support the aspirations of the Welsh people and to shine a spotlight on both the challenges and opportunities in front of them. Having another English Prince of Wales has split opinion here.
Yeah, I can see the difficulties, and obviously, so historically, it is quite a controversial title, but I think, he does have connections with Wales. He was based at Anglesey for a while, so I think he does have that connection.
At the Senedd today, a building opened by Queen Elizabeth, they celebrated her links to Wales.
The life lived so unrelentingly in the public gaze. Every moment captured, every remark dissected, every smile or frown a story. Now that story comes to an end.
Wales, like the rest of the UK, is going through a changing of the guard as the focus moves to what the new era will bring. Howell Griffith, BBC News, Cardiff.
And in Northern Ireland, the proclamation was read at Hillsborough Castle in County Down. A gun salute at Hillsborough Castle marked the King's proclamation. As part of a UK tour, the King and the Queen Consort Camilla will arrive in Belfast on Tuesday before travelling to Hillsborough Castle to view an exhibition on the Queen's long association with Northern Ireland. Now, Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy is at Royal Hillsborough for us now. Emma.
Well, the torrential rain didn't put people off coming here to Hillsborough Castle today. It's the official residence of the royal family in Northern Ireland. Perhaps just beyond all the umbrellas you can see behind me, there's this beautiful carpet of flowers outside the gates of the castle, which is continuing to grow. Now, people watched today at that proclamation as soldiers from the Royal Irish Regiment and the band of the Royal Irish Regiment were on parade, and that gun salute, as you say, rang out from within the grounds of Hillsborough Castle. It was also attended by political leaders and other dignitaries today, although Sinn Féin and the SDLP, the two largest nationalist parties of Northern Ireland, were absent. And of course that is because the politics of Northern Ireland means there's not the same support for the monarchy in nationalist communities here as there is within unionist communities. And Sinn Féin said today they felt today's ceremony was for those whose political allegiances are with the Crown. And of course nationalists aspire to leave the UK and become part of a united Ireland with the Republic. But that said, there's a very strong recognition across communities here of the important role that the Queen played in reconciliation and peace building between Britain and Ireland. And Sinn Féin and the SDLP and the other parties in Northern Ireland will be attending other events on Tuesday when the King visits Northern Ireland.
Emma, thank you very much. Emma Vardy reporting there. Smaller towns and cities have also been holding their own proclamation ceremonies to formally announce the accession of King Charles. Our correspondent Danny Savage is in Otley in West Yorkshire. And Danny, how has the town welcomed the King in this new era?
We know, Rita, I was a bit worried about 2:15 this afternoon that not many people would turn out for this formality, but by 2:30 a good crowd had gathered. People were interested in what was happening and they greatly appreciated the efforts of their town crier.
Our late Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, of blessed and glorious memory.
In town squares across the country, the most traditional of ceremonies.
The crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
In the market town of Otley in West Yorkshire, over 100 people gathered to listen.
Is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles.
And to show their appreciation.
Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip.
It's a great honour and a terrifying responsibility. It's a once-in-a-lifetime occasion. We will never see another Queen probably in our lifetime. Certainly not one who has managed to do so much, live so long and contribute so greatly to the country, to the world, to the Commonwealth. She was a wonderful lady and we will miss her.
It's a historic moment, isn't it? Just important to come and experience it, and surprisingly emotional, actually.
We found out that this is this incredibly long tradition where, before the age of the telephone and modern technology, horses and people would have actually headed out from the capital to proclaim the new king or the new queen across the country. And in our own town of Otley, we wanted to see that. We wanted to hear these ancient words and get the sense of occasion and this connection to the past, really, which for us is really important.
But as the process of a new monarchy moves forward, this is a kingdom still mourning the loss of its queen. Shop windows reflect this.
I think it's nice for people just to notice and maybe just to make them smile and just to think, you know, it is going to have a loss in people's lives. There's people that are walking past the studio and if they look at it and smile, and it makes them happy to think the Queen is back with the person that she loves again.
Here, there were 3 generations of the same family.
I don't think people will ever forget her.
Discussing the succession.
I think it's just a lovely opportunity for everybody to celebrate her life because, she probably touched everybody's heart.
Because I'm still quite young, I've not seen much of the work she does. I know it's there, but I just see her as like a nice woman who cares a lot about her family and a lot about other people.
God save the King!
For people who attended any of these events, it is a moment they are unlikely to forget. Another formality in this week of ceremony.
God save the King.
Danny Savage, BBC News, Otley in West Yorkshire.
The Dean of Westminster Abbey has confirmed that he will conduct the Queen's funeral, which will be held on Monday the 19th of September. The funeral will take place at Westminster Abbey, where Britain's kings and queens are crowned and where Queen Elizabeth II married Prince Philip in 1947. The Queen's faith was very important to her as the head of state and also Supreme Governor of the Church of England. Our religion editor Aleem Makboul has been looking at her faith.
One of the hymns sung at the Queen's coronation, starting a service today at the parish church of the Royals, St Martin in the Fields. Just one of many places of worship in which they've gathered across the country in remembrance.
Like a priest standing at the altar for the people before God, the Queen held the aspirations, commitments and responsibilities of nation and commonwealth in her heart and mind. For 70 years, Queen Elizabeth was at the heart of nation and commonwealth. Now she's at the heart of God. We'll meet again.
What will have been remarked on in many of today's sermons is just how deep the Queen's own faith ran. Elsewhere, the head of the Catholic Church in England and Wales remembers a moment he saw that up close at a national service at St Paul's Cathedral.
At a certain point in the ceremony, we were all asked to recite a long prayer which was printed out in the order of service. And I looked up and the Queen had her eyes shut and she was reciting this prayer by heart. And I thought, there's a woman who prays, who probably prays every day.
Of course, there was a moment every year where we were given an insight into how much the Queen's faith guided her, and that was in her Christmas broadcasts.
For me, the life of Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, whose birth we celebrate today, is an inspiration and an anchor in my life. A role model of reconciliation and forgiveness, he stretched out his hands in love, acceptance and healing. Christ's example has taught me to seek to respect and value all people, of whatever faith or none.
I, Charles III.
In the past, much was made of the comments of the then Prince Charles about wanting to be defender of faiths, but the oath hasn't changed.
King, defender of the faith, do faithfully...
And neither has the desire to protect the practice of other faiths that his late mother clearly held dear. We knew Her Majesty's funeral would take place in Westminster Abbey, and now we know the man who will conduct it. He's had a meeting with the King over the order of service.
We discussed the content, and as you would expect with services being prepared on an occasion like this, we will be making some changes.
So there's back and forth?
There's back and forth, yes.
Back at St Martin in the Fields, they ended with celebration of the accession of the King and what is, after all, a prayer, the national anthem. And as you saw there, we spoke a short while ago to the Dean of Westminster Abbey. We spoke to the Dean of Westminster Abbey a short while ago who'll be conducting the funeral, and it was interesting to hear just how distinctive a ceremony that would be, partly because of exactly what we've been talking about, just how important the Queen's faith was to her. She had her favourite hymns, her favourite passages from the Bible, and that to some extent is going to be reflected here on the 19th.
Aleem, many thanks. Aleem Makboul reporting there. And we'll have more on our main story, including looking at a day of mourning being held in India and at the Queen's love of horse racing. And of course, there are more updates and analysis on BBC News Online. That's bbc.co.uk/news, and also by using the BBC News app. But right now, let's take a look at some of the other news. Ukraine's military says that its forces have retaken over 1,000 square miles of territory during a rapid counter-offensive in eastern Ukraine. If confirmed, it means that Kyiv's forces have tripled their gains in little over 48 hours. After months of deadlock, Ukraine's fight back against Russia has been gathering pace in the south and the east of the country. These blue circles show where the heaviest fighting has been in the past 48 hours. President Zelensky says his army is liberating Ukraine step by step. Ukraine says its forces are fighting to take control of towns and villages around the strategic hub of Izium. From Kiev, our correspondent Hugo Bechega sent this report.
This is what the Russians left behind. Balaklia, in the northeast, invaded in the early days of the war, is back in Ukrainian hands. Russia says its troops are regrouping, but this looks more like a retreat. Even some residents emerging from destroyed houses didn't think liberation was going to come like this.
When the Ukrainian forces came in, we honestly didn't expect it. When I saw our Ukrainian soldiers with the Ukrainian flag, oh, it was great.
Further south, more Ukrainian gangs. Izium was a key base for Russia, essential to resupply its troops in the east. The counteroffensive is moving fast, and the occupiers seem to have been caught by surprise. Ukraine's advance is significant. In days, the front lines have been reshaped, dozens of villages retaken, and Russia has been forced to abandon key positions in humiliating setbacks. Around a fifth of this country remains under occupation, and what is happening now could be decisive in the conflict. Here in Kiev, a message from President Zelensky.
I believe that this winter is a turning point, and it can lead to the rapid deoccupation of Ukraine. We see how the occupiers are fleeing. If we were a little stronger with weapons, we would deoccupy faster.
Russia says it's fighting back, but its troops could be overstretched and under-equipped. Ukraine feels it's got the momentum, and that its flag will be brought back to places where it once stood. Hugo Bechega, BBC News, Kiev.
There's been a day of mourning for the Queen in India, where flags have been flown at half-mast. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi described her as a stalwart of our time, and the opposition leader Sonia Gandhi said she was a much-loved figure. There's been a mixed reaction to the decision to hold a day of mourning, with some Indians questioning why a symbol of colonial rule is being honoured, as our South Asia correspondent Yogita Limai reports.
A day of mourning. Flags were at half-mast across the country in honour of the Queen. On the eastern coast, a unique tribute in the sand. This is a land once ruled by Queen Elizabeth's family. But 75 years since India's independence, the distance between people here and the British monarchy has grown. Back in 1961, though, when the Queen had first visited, it was a different country. Historian Rana Safwi remembers seeing her.
Growing up in those days on fairy tales, for us a queen was a magical figure. It was the first time we had seen a queen. I have very clear memories of her dress. It was a blue dress, and I remember the guards on horses. Today when we see it, we don't see it just with a lot of, romantic sentiments of a queen or a royal family. Today we also see it as part of the exploitation of the colonies, the imperialism.
I asked her how she feels about the day of mourning.
Condoling the death of a queen who embodied dignity and duty in her life does not mean that you're condoning colonialism or imperialism.
This is the statue of an Indian freedom fighter unveiled just a few days ago. What stood here originally was the statue of King George V, Queen Elizabeth's grandfather. When he was inaugurating this, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said a symbol of slavery was being consigned to history. That tells you what much of India thinks about colonial rule today, and why the reaction to the Queen's death here has been muted.
It's very different just across the border in the mountainous kingdom of Nepal, where there's strong affection for the monarchy. For more than 200 years, soldiers from the Gurkha region have served in the UK military. The Queen was always accompanied by 2 Gurkha orderlies for ceremonies. Major Bhuvan Singh Limbu and his father both served the Queen 30 years apart.
On the last duty, she presents us this member of Victorian Order, this cross to us. And that's when she really came close to us, close to me. She saw my medal, the Falklands medal, and then she softly said, "Oh, you have been to Falkland." And I said, "Yes, Your Majesty. We lost a great lady, and we will remember her, and we'll miss her a lot."
Yogita Lemay, BBC News.
King Charles has campaigned on the environment all his life. He highlighted problems like climate change and river pollution from a young age and sometimes faced criticism as a result. Our climate editor Justin Rowlatt takes a look now at how the new king might use his new position to help keep green issues in the spotlight.
It is 53 years since Prince Charles formally became Prince of Wales at a ceremony in Carnarvon Castle in 1969.
I, Charles, Prince of Wales, do become your liege man of life and limb.
He has been campaigning on environmental issues virtually ever since. This is the then Prince in 1970.
We are faced at the moment with the horrifying effects of pollution in all its cancerous forms.
Your Royal Highness, lovely to see you.
His views have not changed.
I've always felt that we're, over-exploiting and damaging nature by not understanding how much we depend on everything that nature provides, and also not understanding or having been somehow trained to believe that nature is a separate thing from us and we can just exploit and control and suppress everything about her.
Over the years, Charles became increasingly concerned about climate. He worked, often in the background, to try and mobilise action, particularly by businesses on the issue. Governments have billions of dollars, corporations have trillions, he'd say. Here's the King opening the International Conference on Climate in Glasgow last year.
We need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector.
So how will his views inform his reign? Charles is well aware of the risks.
So let me ask you this. Is our government doing enough to make these things happen?
I couldn't possibly comment.
The new king has acknowledged his constitutional obligation to remain politically neutral, and his friends have no doubt he will stick to that.
Everything we know about how he has thought about his accession, the moment that he becomes king, tells us that he will be absolutely clear about his constitutional duties. I know he will still want to share that set of concerns, that passion. But it'll be done very differently. It won't be done in the way that he was able to do it as the Prince of Wales.
And few people would disagree with the new king's core belief that we fail to protect and preserve nature at our peril. But whether he'll choose to articulate that view in his new role remains to be seen. Justin Rowlatt, BBC News.
Well, the world of sport continued to pay its respects to the late Queen today. One of her favourite sports, horse racing, resumed, with the St Leger going ahead at Doncaster after it was postponed following the Queen's death. Our sports editor Dan Rowan reports now from the course.
A 2-minute silence as we remember Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
The sport closest to Queen Elizabeth II's heart, paying its respects. Doncaster Racecourse falling silent today as the sport prepared to resume after meetings were abandoned following the late Queen's death. This a chance to reflect on her dedication to a lifelong passion as both owner and breeder. Three-time champion jockey Frankie Dettori, who rode more than 50 winners for the monarch, giving this tribute.
She's done so much for the sport, and personally I know her for 30 years, so yeah, it's a sad day. You know, it's been a sad 3 days. She had the special attraction for racing, and that's why we love her so much. We lost our greatest ambassador.
The pick of today's 9-race card at Doncaster, the St Leger. Put back 24 hours, racing's oldest classic, won by Eldar Eldarov.
It's the last classic of the season, the St Leger, and the smallest field. For only
1955, one of the late Queen's early visits to Doncaster. Her love for the sport already clear. Her horse Dunfermline then winning the St Leger in 1977, the year of her silver jubilee. The young Princess Elizabeth rode from an early age and inherited her parents' passion for racing.
I suppose I first became interested in racing during the war, when my father had leased Big Game and Sun Chariot from the National Stud.
1954 saw her crowned champion flat owner in just her second season. Her horse, Oriole, came second in the Derby, then won the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Diamond Stakes at Ascot. Another glorious moment among so many came in 2013 at Ascot in the Gold Cup.
in the Gold Cup!
Estimate's victory seeing the late Queen become the first reigning monarch to win the trophy in the 207-year history of one of the sport's most prestigious races. Though her famous colours recorded more than 1,800 races, both at home and abroad, the Queen failed in her greatest ambition. The Derby, alone out of the English classics, was to elude her. The only win she could muster in that race was in the sweepstake. Having first attended Royal Ascot more than 70 years ago, she did so once again last year. 2021 proving Her Majesty's most successful ever horse racing year.
The impact of Her Majesty on horse racing is immeasurable, not only as a major owner and breeder, but to have somebody of her standing globally championing your sport is irreplaceable.
Elsewhere, an emotional moment before the Great North Run. 60,000 participants pausing to reflect in Newcastle before the world's biggest half marathon got underway. While at Monza, a minute's silence was also held by drivers on the grid ahead of the Italian Grand Prix. This, another vivid reminder of the special bond the late Queen had with so much of the world of sport. So a poignant day here at Doncaster, a course with which the late Queen had a special connection, and a sport, of course, which she simply loved. And we've seen, haven't we, during the course of this weekend, sports events at venues like this, giving many people the chance, the opportunity to come together to celebrate her life and pay tribute. The outlier, of course, among the major sports is football. Fixtures at all levels cancelled across this weekend. It is set to resume tomorrow, but it may be further cancellations next weekend, of course, depending on policing resources in the build-up to the funeral a week tomorrow. There'll be further details about that in the days ahead.
Dan, thank you very much. Dan Rowan reporting there. Let's take a look at the weather now. Here's Ben Rich. Ben.
Hi there, Rita. Thank you. The crowds who gathered for the Queen's final journey from Balmoral were quite fortunate with the weather, because for much of the day it was fine across eastern Scotland, but that is now changing. As you can see on the radar picture, we've had a lot of rain across Northern Ireland. We saw that earlier in the programme. That rain is now pushing its way up across Scotland, so turning increasingly wet across many eastern and southern parts of Scotland through this evening. Still some rain for Northern Ireland, and some heavy rain starting to develop across the northwest of England, Merseyside, and down into North Wales. And actually here the rain is going to keep on coming in pulses as we go through tonight and into tomorrow. Could start to cause a little bit of disruption. Further south, mainly dry, and it is going to be a very mild night, generally 13 to 16 degrees. So into tomorrow, we will see these outbreaks of rain continuing at times across North Wales, parts of northwest England, generally some cloud and rain across this central slice of the UK. That will act as something of a dividing line. To the north of that, we've got northwesterly winds, 1 or 2 showers, and temperatures for Scotland and Northern Ireland 14 to 18 degrees. Whereas further south and east, particularly for southern and eastern parts of England, it's going to feel warm tomorrow, really warm, highs of around 26 degrees. But this cold front will sweep its way southwards. That will clear the warmth away. Could see some rain getting back into southern parts for a time around Tuesday and Wednesday. Some uncertainty about that. And then we start to see high pressure building from the west, and that will leave us with a northerly wind, and you can see the blue colours up here. We're going to start to tap into actually some much cooler feeling air. So very different feels of the weather as we head through to the end of the week. Temperatures will be dropping away, but for many places it is going to be dry to end the week. Rita, back to you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Let's take another look at the scene at Buckingham Palace right now, where thousands of people are gathering to pay their respects to the Queen and to lay flowers. That has been the scene for quite a few hours today. Many people coming in to pay their respects and to be part of the occasion. Well, that is all from us for now. I'll be back at 10 o'clock this evening. But before we go, we'll leave you with some memorable images from today as the Queen's coffin made its journey from Balmoral to Edinburgh. Bye-bye.